Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 7, Episode 18 of our weekly Q&As. As always, if you're watching this on the YouTube video currently, you can go ahead and check out the links in the description to access this on all the major podcasting platforms. But as always, you're probably not going to, because the number is pretty low, and I think the people who are doing it on that format probably are already doing it there.
So before we get into questions, I wanted to comment. I mean, part of the way we've been doing this is that it's sort of what's been happening in the week. A lot of it is questions and answers and stuff, but some of it is just what's sort of we've seen, we've read, but also what's sort of happening in our lives a bit.
We will say some things that people want to listen to. We will say some things that people don't want to listen to, and they will let us know in the comments. And we will continue to just sort of say whatever we feel like.
So, people who've been watching us for a while, and when I say a while, I mean more than a year, know that every once in a while I put up some strength training videos, right?
Yeah.
And clearly this is not necessarily the audience. It's for a variety. And part of it is I want to document a bit of my journey and just sort of when you hit landmarks, you know what bugs me is when people say, oh yeah, when I was whatever age, I could do this or I could do that. And there's a grip forum called the Grip Board, where one of the rules is that if you make any kind of world-class claim, you get locked or you get deleted unless you back it up with proof, whether that's video proof or competition results or whatever.
Yeah,
and I've always
something
liked
that shows it to be real. It's the same thing with like speedruns in video games.
Is
or
it?
Like
Okay.
video game records, yeah, where you have to have video, an unedited video of like your performance.
Because if you don't, what it ends up being is the whole idea of internet lifting, right? Where people make lots of claims and they're not believable, and then it becomes a weird kind of conversation where you're not actually talking about lifts. You end up talking about the integrity of the people instead.
Yeah, which is not fun.
Yeah, and so the reason why I mentioned that is because it's the last time I posted anything was more than a year. I think it was the chin-ups, but I've also posted a deadlift video because I wanted to mark off how well I was doing, and I'm glad I did because since then I've had a couple of injuries that have limited my ability to deadlift. Mm-hmm. So normally my routine is to deadlift once a week, partly because, I mean, other exercises, there's the argument about whether you should be doing it more often, right? In order to develop strength. And a lot of exercises, it takes more than once a week to develop strength. You can maintain strength, but it's harder to build strength.
Yeah.
And so deadlifts, in my mind, I've read arguments different ways, but to me it's more of a demonstration lift than it is a training lift, only because the idea is that you build up your strength for the deadlift in different ways, and you can demonstrate it, but it's hard to train only deadlift and get a lot stronger. It's easier to train a whole lot of other different things and get stronger in deadlift, is sort of the point. Mm-hmm. But, so I peaked at 375 a few years back, maybe 3 years back it feels like. And lately I've just been at most hitting 345 with maybe the possibility of 355. The reason I point that out is I've tried to start doing sumo deadlifts because I guess you don't.
I don't know what sumo deadlifts are.
So regular deadlift is the way that we normally did it, and sumo deadlift is the one where you put your legs further apart. You spread your legs further apart so that your hands are in between your legs instead of outside your legs.
Yeah, instead of your legs sort of shoulder width apart and then your arms outside of that.
Right. The idea is that the amount that you need to move it is shorter.
That makes sense, because you're lower to the ground, the wider your legs are spread.
Right. The secondary benefit that may not be obvious and is not talked about is the grip is actually easier because when your hands are a little bit closer together, the angle at your wrist is more conducive to generating the power that you need to hold onto the bar. And people have said,
yes, that's some like physics stuff.
Yeah.
Instead of having each of the force at an angle, the closer it is to an exact 90 degrees, the higher percentage of the effort that you're putting in is dedicated to just pulling it straight up.
Well, I guess so. I was thinking more along the lines of that the optimum position for holding on to something with your grip is with your wrist in a neutral or slightly extended position. Because if it's flexed, then it's really hard to actually hold on tight.
I guess that's true. You're also lifting more with your back, so I guess it doesn't apply the same way. It's just that there's more force on your arms if they're at an angle than there is if they're straight up and down. So you're actually applying less force on your arms for the amount of weight.
Again, also not what I was thinking, but it's another good thought. I mean, the thing is, I guess when you spend more time thinking about it, it actually opens itself up to different ideas to try. But I've, again, heard that argument, and it is less strain on my back. I don't feel it, but I can't actually lift that heavy. I mean, it's been a couple weeks now, or maybe 3 weeks, where I've had 3 sessions.
Yeah.
And I'm still, even though I can still do regular deadlift, easily 345 every single session, sometimes topping it a little bit higher.
Yeah.
315 is the best I can do sumo. And I think part of it is I'm just developing some other muscles that I'm not, and I'm getting used to the position, but still, it's only easier, I guess, if you train it. And maybe the potential is there to lift heavier. And again, people have always told me this. I'm just not seeing it. Maybe, and I guess 3 weeks is not enough time to figure that out.
So there we go.
Other things, so related to weights. So what's crazy about this pandemic right now is how much the demand has increased and the pricing has increased for exercise equipment.
Oh yeah, are you gonna tell your Kijiji story?
Yeah, so I've never sold anything Kijiji before. I finally decided, so when you started working out, I still had a standard weight set from when I was young. I just couldn't get rid of it. I mean, I bought that when I was a teenager.
This is some stuff that really might be more exciting to you than anyone else.
Well, it just never occurred to me. So they've been sitting around. They came with us through at least one move, and we don't use them anymore. You used them when you're younger because the standard bar is lighter, and with some extra sleeves, we were able to use the Olympic weight plates to get the right height for deadlifting. But I also had standard weights that have been sitting around, so I finally sold them for more than I bought them for, I don't know, like 30 years ago, 40. And priced them low enough that all the stuff sold within less than 24 hours, but high enough that I don't feel like I got ripped off and that they're just going to resell them.
Yeah.
But it never occurred to me that, like, during a pandemic like this, a lot of people who can't go to the gym now are trying to set up their own gyms at home.
I had a friend talking about maybe buying weights.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, that's too bad.
It was far too late, and they were just going to get, like, some dumbbells or whatever.
Right.
But, the people want stuff to do, and the people who are going to the gym who can't, right?
Yes.
Need to replace that with something. And for people who are starting from nothing, they're probably fine doing bodyweight exercises for a while, right? But for people who went to the gym on a regular basis, are probably past a point where bodyweight exercises would be as efficient for them, right?
I think it'll be harder for sure, but there are some
compared to what
really
they're
challenging
used to.
Compared to what they're used to. But I think there's a lot of potential to really challenge yourself with even bodyweight exercise without a lot of equipment.
Yeah, and it's also, I think, a lot better for people starting out to prove that they actually are willing to stick to a schedule and exercise on a regular basis before they just invest the money in it, right? Because the stuff doesn't matter nearly as much as how much effort you're putting into it.
Yeah, and I think here's the thing, right? Even as gyms are opening up, I think they're probably one of the higher risk areas.
Oh, because there's tons of touching and tons of lots of expulsion of breath.
Yeah.
And like bodily fluid
and sharing space, sharing equipment. Yeah, so I don't know what's going to happen with that. Whether, I mean, we hear a lot about like bars and karaoke. Yeah,
gyms
concerts.
are one of the few places where your whole sort of thing is touching shared objects.
Yeah,
that's the whole thing. Yeah,
that's the point. If you weren't sharing the equipment, then you wouldn't need to go to the gym.
Yeah, and not many other places have an entirety. I think the only other places that do stuff like that are like spaces for children, and we already know those are hotbeds for sickness.
Yeah,
right, like sharing toys and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, and we already know those are terrible for getting other people sick.
One last thing about this week before we get to questions is that United Air laid off almost half of their staff. So they laid off 36,000 people, and that just goes to the point we made months ago about how if you're going to have stimulus money, give it to the people, don't give it to the companies.
Yeah.
There was supposed to be a condition that they wouldn't lay anybody off until, August or September? And they've laid a whole bunch of them off. They took the money. How much is their upper management getting?
Yeah.
It was, again, such a waste, right?
And honestly, when you look at like the environmental effects of like airlines and stuff, it's really, I understand how it's necessary to the world. And I'm not saying it makes sense from where we are to just get rid of airlines. But if they can't exist, if consumer airlines cannot exist on their own two legs, and they're shutting down, if there's less air travel happening, that's actually better for the world.
Yeah, no doubt.
Especially if it's not necessary. Like if it's visiting family and stuff, that's different. But if you're traveling for trips, right? The fact that that's not happening right now is good for the environment and not, nobody's for the pleasure trips that were being taken, right?
Sure.
People aren't missing out on anything that they needed to live.
And up until the pandemic, in my mind, there's flights that are comparable in today's dollars compared to yesterday, like no inflation.
Yeah.
Comparable or even cheaper than they were. So I remember that there were times when we were thinking back of flying to Asia. Mm-hmm. And the flight back then, I think, was on the order of $2,000, just under.
Yeah. And
you could have gotten flights for that price or even cheaper before the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
interesting.
Yeah.
Getting to our first question,
yes.
I think. It's been long enough.
And these weren't even questions from in the last week that we picked up. These were from on our list from the previous video that we just never got to.
Yeah. And I think this first one is going to be something interesting. So this one comes from DI Wackygaming, and they say, question, what makes a good video game? And so obviously we're not like the most qualified people to answer this question. But I think we play enough games that we can maybe talk about it.
So that's interesting when you say we're not the most qualified, because then it depends on how you want to answer the question, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about it from the perspective of like a good video game being successful so it reaches a lot of players, so there's not just the hardcore gamers but the casual gamers?
Or quality, or like smarter game design, or what?
Right. Or which is what makes a good game for the devs versus the player, because you've got to find a balance there, because if it's not good enough for the devs, then there's no reason for them to want to support the game or to develop more of that kind of game.
Yeah, so I found the games that stick with me the best tend to be, and this is just a personal preference in terms of genre, and I play a wide variety of stuff, but the stuff that tends to stick with me the best is usually stuff that's shorter, has a story to tell or mechanics to explore or something really core that it wants to give you, and it knows to end when it's done, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. And so to me, that's one thing that's really important in games. And when I say shorter, I don't mean short. To me, a game that did all the things that I just mentioned was XCOM 2 for me. I love that game. It was like 40 hours. But to me,
so give me a sense, like, because I don't play that kind of gaming at all.
Yeah.
40 hours. Where does that fall on the spectrum of like a long or a short game? Like, what's a long game? What's a short game?
So it's really interesting, right? Because you talk about games right now, and they don't. A lot of AAA games are trying to justify their price, and there's a lot of games, especially when you look at online multiplayer and games as service. And ongoing updated games that are meant to be continuously updated. There are games that you're meant to sink thousands of hours into, right? There's games that have enough grind, like as much grinding potential as like the mobile game Injustice, right? So games like Warframe, I know. Games like other mobile games like Clash of Clans, I know, you're supposed to be able to sink tons of hours into. Like a game like Destiny 2, I think you can spend a ridiculous amount of time raiding and doing stuff. And then you talk about like a game like Fortnite. The game that I've been playing recently, Valorant, right?
Ooh, you got to put some of that Valorant footage up. You were explaining some of the stuff that you recorded. It's pretty spectacular.
Yeah, I don't know. If you're listening to this and you know anything about Valorant, it's like a sort of CS:GO style tactical shooter, and you'd like to see clips, let me know. But I think my main issue right now is it's weird finding the balance between just uploading them without comment, and anybody who is here for Injustice who wouldn't understand what's impressive about Valorant won't be seeing
they won't
as
appreciate
much,
it? Okay.
Versus the explanation, which would be totally unnecessary for... It's not even that they won't appreciate it, it's that they won't have the context to understand.
Right.
And they'd be like missing something and it just doesn't mean anything to them. Versus the commentary that I could give, where I go really in depth the same way I went with you about what was happening moment to moment, that would be sort of overkill for people who actually played. Right? Which would be a level of detail that would be maybe a little bit annoying to them.
So maybe let us know in the comments if there's interest in how you want it. Would you want to see the footage? Would you want it? Because it made a huge difference to me to hear the commentary. Like, it made... I clearly don't play as much as you do.
And so, games like that are meant to last a really, really long time. And then there are, like, indie games that I've loved that are not supposed to last very long at all. Like Her Story, you beat it in less than an hour.
That was great.
Yeah.
I played that.
And it was incredible. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of games like that. Like, The Magic Circle was not a long game. I'm I'm trying to think of other games that have been really short that have really stuck with me. What Remains of Edith Finch is not a long game.
Oh, that was
at
good
all.
too. Yeah, I played
and
that.
that is spectacular, right?
Yeah.
So the thing that it turns out that games and the length of them vary so wildly. I think more than any other medium. It's like, I think the closest thing in terms of the time scale being as short as it is to as long as it is like
Right.
the time it takes to make a painting, right? Where somebody could spend years on something,
Right.
or somebody could spend a couple hours on it. I don't think the consumption of a media varies so wildly for any other genre of media.
So it still reminds me, like, it's sort of underlying what we're talking about is the idea that the value of a game has to do with the number of hours. And
Yeah.
I want to bring up that one YouTube video that you showed me.
The quote, "Hey Ash, what you playing?" from the Gone Home video. Yeah.
And it was Paul Blart, Mall Cop, being such a great movie because of the number of hours that it'll take you closer to death.
Yeah. Where it's like, that's wild. That's like saying that if you watch Paul Blart Mall Cop, it's better than, I forget, it was like whatever really well-known movie because it's longer than it. And the dad was like, no. That's like saying if you watch Paul Blart Mall Cop 3 times, it's better than Citizen Kane, the first Godfather movie, and whatever, all put together.
Yeah.
And he's like, Paul Blart Mall Cop, I
okay.
love that movie.
So I know it's a joke, but I think there is sort of, there's a kernel of truth in that joke where the more time you spend with it, the more value it has.
Yeah.
With the qualification that as long as that time that you spend, you don't resent
Is
it.
enjoyed. Yeah.
Yeah, so that it's pleasurable. And I guess you can say how much joy you get out of it, but the key really is, I think, whatever time you spend, the more you spend, the more you want to spend with it is an improvement, as long as you don't resent the game. Mm-hmm. And would it be fair, or would it be too reductive to say that whatever else about the game, that you could totally ruin any kind of game and make it not good by introducing any kind of mechanic that makes people resent playing the game and need to play it obsessively?
Yeah, that reduces the quality of any game. But I mean, like, Injustice almost has like little bits of that, right? And different games have lots of that. And lots of games that are ultimately not bad games and are popular and have a lot of people playing it can have some pretty unfortunate, like, especially monetization and retention based mechanics that are not great for the players. So I think, to me, what makes a good game, sort of regardless of genre and regardless of personal preference, is when the game has a reason to exist. It has something to either set it apart or something that the developer was passionate about making. It sort of stands alone, even if it's in a very small way, right? It knows what it's trying to do. It does its best to execute on it, and it makes sure it understands what it is not. It sort of understands its own scope, right?
Right.
And I think that can describe pretty, like, every single game I've enjoyed.
Right.
But, you know...
So then part of it is making sure that the game is clear to the player about what it intends. Because if you get the wrong player coming to the game with the wrong kind of expectations, then they're gonna not enjoy it. Yeah. They're gonna resent it. So it's all part of it, right? It's almost like
a lot of players will optimize a game, even if there's a developer intended way of playing, but there's another way that produces better rewards that's actually less satisfying. A lot of players will play things safe. Right. A lot of players will optimize the game past the point where there is a challenge to it. Right. And, you know, some games are just about optimization where that's the whole point. But in games that aren't, where there's sort of an intended play style, but they don't have, you know, mechanics balanced properly, people will just play exactly one way. And this isn't a one-to-one with Injustice, but you can imagine if the developers wanted, like, all the gold cards to be played equally and all the gears to be played equally, right? The way that they've, you know, built some of the gears, it's totally optimized for certain loadouts and totally not optimized for others, where there's certain combinations that are just far and above way better, right? Than playing with other people, even if they are technically viable options. And I think that the problem with games is that games as a category is so broad that you really can't say anything else that is universally true about what makes a good game. Because what I found is really important to me recently is enjoyable moment-to-moment gameplay. So I've been, you know, playing some games from the Bundle for Racial Justice and Equality here and there.
Oh, you've you need to show us some more of the games that you've been playing and
Yeah,
enjoying.
and I haven't like beaten anything else or gotten to the point where I'm like ready to like review anything else. But you know, a lot of them have really good moment-to-moment gameplay. But the thing about it is that's not even something that's true in all games. There are games that are visual novels, right? There are games that purposefully have sort of obtuse gameplay. Like Papers, Please is not a game that has good moment-to-moment gameplay. It's an incredible game. It's a really, really interesting game, and it's worthwhile to play.
Sorry, Papers, Please?
Papers, Please.
Okay.
But it's
Is that the one where you're like
it's the data validation one where
you're a bureaucrat and you're checking
Yeah.
people's papers?
Yeah, you're a bureaucrat in like a totalitarian state,
Right.
and you've gotten like this work lottery to be border security for the fake country of Arstotzka.
Okay.
And yeah, you're literally just doing data validation in a purposefully cramped screen where they make the actual usable play space like a third of the screen for no reason other than to make it harder for you to fit all your papers in like on your desk without them
Right.
overlapping and having to constantly shuffle and manage stuff. And you know, it's a stressful, oppressive game on purpose. So if you say anything like even the game should be fun to play, does that make a good game? I don't know, because Papers, Please isn't fun to play. They've made a really good game. So it's
So in what way is it good? If it's
good.
not fun to play?
It's good because it really accurately puts you in a specific position. It creates an aesthetic. It has a strong sense of what it is. It stands apart, right? It knows what it is. It does it to the best of its ability, and it doesn't overstay its welcome, which is the stuff that I said makes a good game, right? And it can do all that without being like fun in and of itself, because it's an enjoyable experience. Because you when you set this really impressive mood and you spend a little bit of time in it and then you leave it, there's moments of levity in it. It's really cleverly written. It's really cleverly designed. It's just not designed to be fun. Like if they wanted to make it a more enjoyable experience, it would have just made, you know, your space bigger. They would have made it easier to manage papers. They could have automated, you know, a bunch of the moving papers around and reshuffling stuff, right? They could have made it, you know, a nicer color scheme so that it was better to look at, right? All these things would have made it easier to play and objectively more enjoyable in the moment-to-moment gameplay to play, but it would have undercut its themes, right? So I think it's fun because it's a good piece of media. Like when you read a sad book, right?
Right. Oh, that's
It's still
okay.
good.
Yes.
And so
Because you want to feel those emotions.
yeah,
when
it
it's
doesn't
sad.
it doesn't need to induce positive emotions. It just needs to effectively induce the emotions that it's trying to induce.
Right. Ah, that's perfect. Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. I
So
got it.
Papers, Please is great, but the emotion that it's trying to induce in you is like frustration and hopelessness.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why Injustice has such playability and why I still feel it's such a good game now is because we've gotten past that initial hump that we would be stuck at if we were still earlier on in the gameplay, and we would not only would it not be enjoyable because we'd be struggling to get anywhere, but the progress that we'd be making would be potentially so slow when you see how much more progress there is to make. I think we came at the game at the perfect time because each time the game sort of added more things to do, we were already at the top of the sort of at the time the current game's limit.
Yeah.
Right? We were all our characters are 40 and level 5 before they added level 50. Level 50 and Elite 7.
Yeah. I think one thing that's really interesting about Injustice 2 is I think in a way we're actually adding more to the game by the amount of time we put into it and sort of digging into its systems than was designed in explicitly by the developers. There's enough systems interacting in terms of the combat, right? That there's room for really sort of little quirks and some things obviously that the developers programmed in, right? Like when you look at the way blocking works and the way responding to blocking works.
Right.
Obviously, the AI has that explicitly coded in. Those behaviors are, made by the developer to act exactly how they do. But there's a lot of little ways that like hits knocking people back and how that interacts with specials and how you can, chain specials together and keep people interrupted and how different characters have different sort of capabilities to do those chains, right? And a lot of other really little stuff.
Very subtle stuff.
The developers probably didn't think of, and almost certainly, for some of these things, did not put in on purpose. They might as well be, they're as unintentional as any of the glitches. It's just that when they're discovered, it's not actually something that they need to worry about. It's just another little nuance of the game, right?
Right.
And so I think that's one thing that's really interesting, where if we engaged with Injustice on a different level, it would be a much shallower game. Because the actual gameplay itself is very simple.
Yes.
There's not a huge amount of complexity, and you can see in some of the other games they had, especially that the like Arkham Knight one or whatever, or the Arkham Origins one.
I never played that.
Where you could only play as different versions of Batman, and there was not the same upgrades at all or the same gear, right? It was the same combat system, but when you strip out the other sort of ancillary systems from it, it becomes so flat and so lifeless. And it's just having enough sort of systems all interacting together and all working together in ways that the developer could not directly intend or test for every single combination.
Right.
And it's from that you end up getting a lot of sort of natural richness that was not actually,
planned,
explicitly meant to be there in the first place. Yeah. Which I think is interesting. Yeah. You get some value out of the game that wasn't developer designed.
That was a great question.
Yeah, it was. Hope we answered it appropriately. So we have another question here from Noah Guzman, and they say, I have 3 questions. First of all, do you guys have any characters that you would like to see more cards for? And if so, where and what would you like them to do passive/special wise? I personally would love a new Reverse Flash, Zatanna, Darkseid, Lobo, and or Cyborg. I think we'll answer this first, and then we'll do one at a time.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. We love Flashes.
Yes.
And to me, it's not even so much the characters, because if I know somebody, that's great. If I don't know their property, I also don't care that much.
Oh, I like the Flash as a character.
Yeah, so,
besides the gameplay, I like the Flash as a character.
I like, even if I don't know Static, right? I didn't know Static before this.
Right.
Static's still cool to have, right? It's how they play that matters to me, mostly. And if you already know them, that's sort of a bonus. So what I really like, and what I really want, is other people who play fast.
Yes.
Right? That's really the
That was the big thing of Flash.
Yeah. So that's why we like Flash, separate from his speed, right? Because even if we, for some reason, like really didn't like a character or really liked another character, we're not going to play them just because of who they are.
I will.
I guess so. Maybe you will a little bit, but I won't.
I've got a stronger history. If Amethyst or Warlord ever showed up, I would be playing them just to play them.
Okay. So yeah, you would play those. But for me, I think just the faster characters are the ones that are always better to have. And I think
I'd like to see more passes where you actually increase your speed. Normally I'm generally sort of neutral on passives, but the more I think about it, the more it occurs to me that I would really love, like, the Speed Force stuff, where you get to have moments where you can play with the I always use the wrong words because I know there's common terms, but the latency and the refractory period, so that when you can get in there and change how you play because of the speed change, that'll make it so much more interesting.
Mm-hmm. If I could see one passive in the game, what I think would be really interesting and what would open up a huge amount of gameplay in a single character is I would like to see somebody with some form of customizable passive. I think what would be really interesting is if you have somebody who you can, like, for example, select one of like 3 passives to engage, or just any sort of variety.
That's sort of like Arkham Knight Batman.
Sort of like Arkham Knight Batman, but I mean more like more than just selecting from that 6 at the beginning of a fight. I'm talking about like a little bit more granular, to the point where you could like go in, and what I really want is sort of like a resource allocation for a passive, where they decide,
like you're rolling your character,
where they decide like 10% more crit chance is equivalent to X% more damage on this special, which is equivalent to X status effect on the first special. And I think if there was some way to like mix and match, where you have like essentially like points, where you have almost like a modular character a little bit, where you could get in and, for example, like make his theirs first special like power drain, right? And it would cost something, and you could make their like give them a chance to have unblockable, and it would cost some sort of like amount of their like total resource as stats.
Right. two passes that I would like to see. One, both potentially on tag-in, because we've seen examples of this in Immortals. I would like a character who, on tag-in, for 8 seconds, would neutralize the other character's passive.
That would be really cool.
Or somebody who, in the first 8 seconds of tag-in, neutralizes the other character's gears.
Yeah.
Temporarily, short period of time, but it would completely change the strategy of fighting. Like, that would be
it would
pretty crazy.
It would open you up to a really short burst where you could really hit hard.
Yeah, you could destabilize whatever strategy that people get, into these ruts and play them exactly the same way. That would totally destabilize it, but not in a completely unfair way.
Yeah, and in terms of people that we'd like to see more cards for, I think the thing is that we just want more content, right? So at this point, new cards are the least amount of effort to implement. I would be absolutely fine if they were to implement cards that were just color reskins of the same characters with a different passive, right? Yeah. Even if they didn't put a new special in, because I know that's animation work, if they just did something weird, like they pulled a special from another character that was theoretically thematically appropriate, so you have a Flash that's just a different color palette with an interesting passive, and then a special from, I don't know who it would be, Solomon Grundy or whatever.
Or do something they've already done. So they've got the metal characters, right? That are like the Batman Who Laughs is really a Joker. You could have characters who would take the movements of somebody else, and that wouldn't take a lot of coding, right? Like, you'd just be changing the graphics. That would be kind of fun and funny.
Yeah, because, at this point, it's more content. I don't really care about the optics of it. I care more about the gameplay, right?
Yeah.
So, really, the reason why we do want more skins, and more skins of literally anybody, and it would just be whoever's easiest to make a new version of, so that we could, have some more people to play around with.
Yeah.
So there we go. That's the first question.
Yeah.
Second question, do you guys still believe that your 2.12 Survivor strategy is still one of the best ways to beat Fight 16? If not, what improvements would you make?
That's an interesting question, because part of the problem with that is that there are more fights now.
Yeah.
So it doesn't end at 16.
So it's really hard to say.
I like the question because it's very specific. It's not like, is your strategy for Survivor the same? Because it's not the whole strategy. I think the first 12 fights, probably, it would work just as well.
Yeah.
The reason why I think our strategy from then would not be as effective now, two big things. One is the passives from your teammates that are knocked out before the fight starts no longer work. And why it mattered so much in the Fight 16 at the time, which was random tag, and I don't even know if it still is random tag.
Yeah.
But we used to keep our regime flash in to give the speed boost to reverse flash, and it had the extra benefit of making it less likely that we would end up with the wrong character at any given time in the fight.
Yeah.
That's a huge benefit.
It is.
In random tag. That's the first thing. Second thing why I think it wouldn't be as effective is because reverse flash requires more speed boosting than he would naturally get from his special one to achieve the same kind of speed that he had originally when we filmed that 2.12 Survivor completion.
Mm-hmm. The thing that's a little unfortunate is because there's more fights, and when we had filmed that, right, we had spent some time, we had really made an effort. There was takes where we were really close, and you had to toss away 45 minutes of gameplay because you lost it at the end. So that was really a personal sort of challenge. And so once we put that in the vault, right, it's always been in the back of our head, obviously, because it's a game mode, right, and it's still a game mode that we play,
right,
what works for Survivor. But in terms of as you get to the late game, as the game has updated and changed and become different, right, we've understood what parts of the strategy won't work anymore, but we haven't replaced those with working parts because maintaining the ability to complete Survivor, it was not something on our list of priorities at all.
And it was a one-time thing just to do for the sake of doing it at the time.
Yeah.
You still there's a lot of preparation that goes into it as far as planning ahead for each fight to know what the restrictions are.
Yeah.
And you've got a good example now doing your other podcast about how much more time it takes to create something polished.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So the time commitment to produce a 45 to 50 minute video, and that's if you're only stopping at Fight 16, right? I mean, if you're going to try to finish it,
mm-hmm.
The time commitment to that is ridiculous. I mean, we can barely, for the small amount of time we spend making these videos, we can't. I couldn't find the time to do the kind of work involved in making a new Survivor video. However, that being said, I have some ideas about what I'd want to try if I was going to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think back then when we finished it, we didn't have the same options of characters and gear combinations that would hit nearly as hard. And people will probably, who play it, probably already have some suspicion or guesses about what I'm thinking of. And that would be Batman Ninja Batman, who, because he's, I think, the only character that can make use of Cloak of Destiny as well, is because he's got a Special 2, which naturally does more damage than Special 1.
Yeah.
He stuns right at the beginning of his special, but the damage is sort of back and weighted. He can do more than 1 million damage with one well-placed Special 2. Mm-hmm. The question now is whether Fight 16 would even let you do that, whether Special 2 is
that's the thing. And
disabled.
when they added more fights, right? Going to Fight 16 was already really, really hard. Probably like the hardest challenge in the game.
Yeah.
Right? The way they added more fights almost makes it seem like they were adding to the point where you're not really supposed to be able to complete it.
Right, they're just making it harder for sake of being harder. Not that it's actually something that's meant to be done.
It's not like a new challenge, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's more just like you're going to die, and we just want to make sure that you don't run out of content so that we force you to stop.
Right. And part of me feels like it's not even that we want you to die. It's just like, I can't remember what book I was reading where there was a game that the developer had made, and they just made each successive level harder and faster. And at some point, people were just supposed to fail. And then the developer, when they saw somebody who'd gotten really good at it, was able to fight or do the game at such a high level because they just honed their reflexes enough to be able to speed up more than they'd ever expected. The developers had ever expected.
I don't know what.
I can't remember. It strikes me that it might have
fiction or non-fiction.
It was fiction. I think it was like it might have been one of the Orson Scott Card books back when I was willing to read his stuff.
Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe Lost Boys, something like that.
Anyways, so that's that. We don't have an exact strategy, but that's what it would be. We have to test it.
Yeah, and I think you still really have to lean on Raven a lot. Raven doesn't change. Reverse Flash might.
Yeah, because Raven really takes off 80% of their health.
Yeah.
Give or take, and has an infinitely regenerating health pool as long as you're careful with her. In between fights.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Noah has one more question.
Yeah. So last question, what nth metal pack do you recommend to buy? I bought around 12 pro packs and I only have 2 metal cards, so is it my luck or should I try a different strategy? It says luck here, I'm pretty sure luck.
Yeah.
It seems like a safe bet.
Yeah. It comes down to what you want. I think the best, if you want metal cards, the best bang for your buck is probably the 400 nth metal pack. Because you marginally have a better chance of getting a metal character out of it.
Yeah, per unit currency spent.
Yeah. If you want good gear and good secondary cards that are not metal, then I think the 800 is probably best because the selection of gears and the non-metal, the gold cards that you get instead of metals are usually typically better, and so are the gears.
Yeah, but if you're just purely getting metals, it's the sort of middle cost pack.
Yeah, and if you have very limited amount of the nth metal and you just want metal cards and you've got time to kill, then go for the 200 because then you just use the reset refund airplane mode glitch strategy to just keep on buying until your 200 actually nets you a metal card.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there we go. And here is the next question from somebody who I'm absolutely going to mispronounce the name. Shabe Asghar. It's SHOAIB ASGHAR 98.
Yeah.
So Shabe is my best guess, but it could be Shoaib. I don't know. I'm not sure how many syllables are even in that, unfortunately. Yeah. So as always, let us know how to pronounce it in the description if you want. We do read them. I don't always retain that information for long enough if you're going to ask another question, but we do try to make our best effort to at least educate ourselves, and then our poor memory sort of screws us over.
I can't believe Aquaman survived that. Aquaman barely survived. He had almost no health on that, defending that super.
And so they say, what is the next expected challenge character, and we have another question from Sohan Masters, and they say, another great vid. Also, if you don't mind, do you have a challenge log or something to predict upcoming challenges? And so the really short answer is we don't. The way that we predict upcoming challenges is seeing what pack in the store there is for credits.
Yeah.
And there's a good reason why, which is just that for the other stuff, everything that we have a prediction for is on a noticeable cycle that when we track it, we see the cycle repeat.
Right.
And challenge characters just isn't.
Yeah, so what we're seeing lately, actually, is a lot of really older challenge characters that haven't been around for more than a year and a half.
Yeah.
Some, like, 3 or 4 years ago. So there's just a lot more variety of characters. There's some characters that I don't think have ever been a challenge in Android that have been once in iOS.
Yeah. That's the thing, is that there's so many more challenge characters than any other type of...
In the multiplayer.
Than any other type of exclusive content. And it's constantly been like the apparent like order if there is a cycle. To me, it would make sense for there to be a cycle, right? Because ideally you'd want to set stuff up so that the game keeps chugging, even if theoretically nobody is updating it, right?
Right.
If nobody's putting any sort of active effort into anything, right? You don't want it to break. So I'd assume that there's a challenge character cycle. But the way that challenges have worked have changed so much over the years. And if there was a cycle at any given point, it seems like it's, changed either every update or every couple of updates or every long enough interval that we aren't able to figure out when it loops over. Right. And it's not that they're just jumping to another point in a cycle, that they've changed the cycle around, that if you look at since when we started keeping track of it, right, which is, I don't know how many data points at this point. It's like 100? Has it been 2 years? No, it hasn't.
No, so beginning from January 2019, so 52
so maybe,
plus more than half a year, so we're talking, what, like 70 to 80? Probably 80 weeks?
So even 80 data points, there's no pattern there that we can tell.
Yeah.
So
there have been little sort of short patterns. It's almost like pi, right? It repeats a little bit at certain points, and you think, oh, now we're going to see a pattern, and then it doesn't.
Yeah, so there's just, it's eluded any sort of prediction, and we are actually keeping track of it, and if it ever comes around to it, theoretically, we would let people know, right, if we knew what the pattern was. We would let people know at least that there was a pattern, but we have no way of predicting it. And I think the good news is, really all you need to do is check in once a week. Right? It's pretty low stakes in terms of checking in. If all you care about is the challenge character, you just have to remember to check in once a week.
Yeah, you don't even have to watch the video. We've been putting it in the description who the challenge character is.
Yeah.
So you don't even have to watch it.
Yeah, so you can sign into Injustice once a week, or you can check our video once a week. And unfortunately, that is the easiest way to check it. For us, the easiest way is to check the game itself. And for everybody else, the easiest way is to probably check the description of our video.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there we go. The next question comes from Gerald, and they say, will we get a re-challenge of Red Sun Deathstroke, Aquaman, and Zod?
Alright, so what's interesting to me is Fitzgerald is actually split into the two words.
Yeah, it's Fitz space Gerald. First name Fitz, last name Gerald.
Right, which speaks to, I don't know if this is true. I think I picked this piece of trivia somewhere, is that Fitz traditionally has a name.
Bastard son
of Gerald. Yeah. Or Fitzsimmons.
Fitzroy.
Yeah.
Fitzpatrick, yeah.
Yeah, interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of a related question, right? Because after saying that we can't make a prediction, will we get a re-challenge of Red Sun, Deathstroke, Aquaman, and Zod? I'm guessing actually no, because they were old enough that their stats are low enough that if there's anybody at the wheel in charge of the rotations at Injustice, there's a good chance they will not put these back because they were from so long ago. Their passives aren't useful enough to make them competitive or useful on a team. Like they're, a little bit of increased speed. What does Aquaman do? He doesn't really do much for anybody else, and Zod doesn't have a team passive either.
Yeah, so there's not really a huge reason to bring them back. They'd be a pretty low value target
because their stats are so low.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if Android ever had Zod. I know we might have had Aquaman, and we definitely had Red Sun Deathstroke, because that was around the time we started playing.
Yeah,
was Red Sun Deathstroke.
Yeah,
these many years ago.
Mm-hmm. So we have a next question, which I think is going to be interesting to talk about. This is from Apocalypse. This is from a while ago because we haven't had an opportunity to get to it. This was from when we were talking about the video.
Oh, that you were thinking of playing something
that would be worth doing a face reveal.
The big reveal.
And would also probably naturally include a reveal of like my first name.
Right.
Just because of the nature of what the footage would be.
Yeah.
And so they say, by doxing yourself, wouldn't you be unintentionally doxing your father? Danger, Will Robinson. And I think if the content that I make would be tied into any of my real, actual social medias, I would be. I think I don't really have a social media presence outside of this. I think YouTube is actually my primary social media presence. I don't use my socials for like posting. I really just use them to stay in touch with people.
Right.
So I think theoretically someone might be able to look at my name and like a picture of me, or maybe even use like a face, like Google image search to try to find me.
Right.
But I think for the purposes of what we do, the reason why you don't talk about, like you keep your sort of personal life in this separate, I think the people who are putting the work in to find that connection, I don't know if that's actually, if that would be the same issue for you.
It wouldn't.
So I think I'd be allowed to do that. It wouldn't be, it's not ideal, right?
Right.
But I think if the content came together, we would both have to make a little bit of a sacrifice in the name of good art.
Right. So I know it was meant in jest a little bit.
Yeah.
With the Danger Will Robinson
But
joke.
it is like it's a good point, and it's something that we appreciate you bringing up, right?
Because for the number of how many years we spent where people didn't know how we were connected to each other.
Yeah. And I think that also came because how young I was when this started, right? And now I'm in a position where I'm sort of allowed to, and I have to manage my own internet footprint responsibly.
And you can make your own choice. You actually have enough information to make your own independent choice about what you want to do with your online presence.
And I was thinking about it, and I think the conclusion that I also came to is that if I were to make it, I don't think I would upload it on this channel. I think I would actually, it's different enough that I would probably put it on a second channel, and I would just put a notification of it. I would make like a little, almost like trailer video on this channel. Title it something like, you know, I finally do a face reveal or something like that, right? Something to give people a sense of what they're clicking on, and to give the people who like this channel something to click on, and then just say, hey, check out the link in the description. There's a video somewhere else, because I think for what it is, it'd be different enough. And I don't really, like, even if I'm doing a face reveal, I don't really think that type of thing has the same place on this channel. And we've had channels that we've made and abandoned over the years, and I just think it would be cool if it was its own separate piece and sort of stood on its own. And because then also, if anything happens for it, like to pull back the curtain a little more without giving people enough information, the content would involve in like a similar way as everyone, like that edited video with the zero damage video,
right.
Where it would probably involve me using at certain points maybe some clips of music, a specific music that would be copyrighted. So for all the work that it would be, it's going to be a lot of time, money, and effort, and I'm going to get no money and ad revenue from it. So if I were to do it, and also the other people who would be doing the thing with me would be putting in a lot of effort, minus the editing, for also no money. So if I were to be doing it, I think I would have to launch it on a new channel, and I would have to launch it on a new channel that would have like a Patreon open with one-time donations. So if anybody watched it, really enjoyed it, and wanted to motivate me to make more, there would be an opportunity to donate, and I would just have the same donor level, and they'd be able to select which donor level based off of who they wanted to give the money to for the person in the car, and I let people donate to whoever they wanted to.
It's like the Hunger Games
or something like that,
where you can send stuff into the battle or whatever, but to sponsor people and send like I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Supplies.
Where, but I mean, at the end of the day,
That's
it
funny.
wouldn't be to make money either, right? Like that would just be sort of like a half-hearted way of saying if anybody wants to toss in some cash to recoup costs. Because I think that's another thing that we've realized doing this is that people like us more than we thought they would. Right? There are people who who engage regularly and who are part of the community, and those people have always, been pleasant surprises to us. And then the people who are also willing to donate are also entirely separately really pleasant surprises to us. Yeah. Where when we first started it, it was more just that was the next thing to do. That with the platform size that we had, we could actually try still, because you don't need to have people sign up to your Patreon to have a Patreon.
Right.
And then when people did it, we were like, oh my god.
Yes.
Oh my god. And every time we cash out that Patreon money, every time I cash out that Patreon money, I still get this sort of like, wow, people are
the little frisson of joy.
Yeah, and so I think at this point that I've realized that for some stuff, people obviously like us more than I imagined, and sometimes it's worth taking that little extra step where, especially if it's not costing anything to anyone who doesn't want to support us, putting it out there, because you never know what's going to happen, and you get pleasantly surprised, right?
Right.
So hopefully, I really think I need to make the video, because it's been in my head. And I can't get it out, even though practically with everything shut down, I can't right now. I really, really want it to happen one day.
Right.
And if I did, I think I would want to at least give it the proper sort of full YouTuber try. Right. Where I would, if I set up the Patreon and everything, I'm set up for success if it happens. And the good news about starting it on a new channel with new channel requirements where I wouldn't be able to get it monetized is it would not be monetized for me anyway, so I'm not losing out on any of the money I would be getting otherwise. But so that's a little more talking about the video that I'm being purposefully cagey about, because it stays perfect as long as it stays in my head.
This
right?
is true.
And nobody else can create it without me.
So we're running out of footage. The biggest question big set of questions we're gonna have to save, and we've got one more question I think we've got time for.
Yeah. So our last question of this episode comes from the Flaming Cookie, and they say, "Who should I use the Netherrealm Kama gear on?"
Everybody is sort of the short answer. And okay, so I guess every team should have a basic damage dealer. If you are ever on a team that requires specials, and there is somebody on the opponent's team that will counter your specials, then you need to be ready to deal with it. And even though your basic damage dealer isn't going to be your main damage dealer, you need somebody who's capable of doing stuff without power.
Yeah.
And when I say everybody should have it, there's a reason that there are so many gears with basic damage boost and crit chance on basics. Mm-hmm. It is hugely effective.
It's bread and butter.
Absolutely. So you got Netherrealm Kama, you've got Prometheum Longsword, you've got the Power to Screama Sticks, you've got Blade of the War God. I'm sure I'm missing something, but those are all gears. Those are the top gears, right, that have that. I mean, you could also talk about Mark of Lady Shiva, which is still a good gear. I think, is it the Power Gloves? There's another gear maybe that has lower levels of both, but that's a hugely synergistic couple of abilities.
So literally anybody that you're not gearing to be a special specialist that you have an extra gear slot for, you can put it on. Obviously basic damage dealer makes the most sense, but even at the end of the day, if you put it on a special specialist, like if you have that extra slot, you're doing basic attacks no matter what you're doing, and it never hurts to deal more damage with your basic attacks.
Yeah.
So there we go.
All right, and then we get ride this out and see what reward we get. And so at the end of our video, we always like to give a shout out and a big thank you to the people who are supporting us on Patreon.
I also before that have a quick shout out to Eliza Rick and Morty Caton. She turns herself into a pickle. It's the funniest thing I've ever seen. This shout out has been brought to you by having a high enough IQ to understand Rick and Morty, and both of those are sort of ironic Rick and Morty jokes, just in case anybody here is worried about us watching Rick and Morty.
Right.
Or liking it too much, I think, which is the main issue with that particular piece of content. So yeah, we'd like to give a huge thank you to everyone who has supported us on Patreon. Also, so that's a huge, huge thank you to Console, Peasant, and Edwoon who are supporting us at the highest tier. Last Word, Mohammed Albshaiti at the Your Message Here tier, Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, Brandon C, and Irvin Ruiz who are supporting us on the credited level, and Chris Wolf, Scarlet Danny, and Awesome Gamer 241 at the gratitude level. Thank you so much, and thanks so much to all of you for watching. We'll see you next time. Komoda.